It was Christmas Day when my daughter told me, "Just wait at the airport, Dad. I'll be there soon." I believed her. I stood there for over 12 hours, calling her 35 times. Not once did she show up. Instead of the joyful welcome I had pictured, I was greeted by a crushing silence and a deeper kind of abandonment that stung worse than the cold air swirling around me. My own daughter had chosen what she could inherit someday over the man who raised her. When I eventually paid for a cab to get to their house, nothing could have prepared me for what I would walk into. The handles of the gift bags were already digging into my fingers by the time I stepped off the plane at Denver International Airport. It was 2:47 p.m. on December 25th, Christmas Day. The terminal was alive with energy, children laughing, couples sneaking kisses under cheap plastic mistletoe dangling from signs, entire families reuniting with warm embraces and happy tears. I shifted the 6 bags I had hauled through 2 layovers and 3 airports, each one carefully packed over the past few weeks with gifts chosen from memory and love. Inside the velvet jewelry box wrapped in silver tissue was my late wife Sarah's mother's emerald necklace, Victoria's favorite heirloom, the one she used to gaze at when she was a child. That was going to her today. For little Emma, there was a brand new American Girl doll, the exact model she had pointed out during our last FaceTime. And for Martin, I had picked up a soft cashmere scarf from that boutique Sarah used to adore in Jackson Hole. As I stood near a column, a joyful cheer erupted nearby. A toddler leapt into his grandfather's arms, and the older man spun him in a circle while the parents snapped photo after photo. My heart tightened with hope. Soon, I thought, I would be that grandfather with Emma. I pulled out my phone and tapped Victoria's name. She picked up, sounding distracted. "Dad," that was it. No cheer, no affection. "Hey, sweetheart, I just landed. Everything went smoothly. I'm here." "Oh, right. Dad, we're running a bit late. Just wait at the arrival's exit. We'll be there shortly." Her tone stopped me cold. There was no excitement in her voice, just a mechanical sense of duty. "Is everything okay? You sound—" "Everything's fine," she cut in quickly. "Just a little Christmas madness, you know how it gets." Except I didn't know. Sarah and I had always gone out of our way to be early when family was coming. We'd circle the terminal 3 times if we had to. Never once left anyone waiting at the curb. Should I head toward baggage claim or wait here? "Dad, I really need to go. Just wait at the main exit doors. We'll figure it out when we get there." Click. The call ended before I could say anything else. I looked down at my phone, still lit up with her name. Around me, the airport kept moving. A woman about my age wrapped her son in a tight embrace, laughing like she might never let go. The boy grinned, ear to ear. Behind me, the baggage carousel roared to life. I grabbed my suitcase and wheeled everything toward the exit, the bags swaying and bumping against my legs with every step. Outside, snowflakes drifted from the sky like powdered sugar, settling quietly on the curb and rooftops. I parked myself near the automatic sliding doors, where families usually stood waiting for their rides. People came and went, trunks slammed shut, engines idled. Car tires crushed fresh slush into gray streaks. I checked the time. 3:05 p.m. A man hurried past with a car seat in one hand and his suitcase in the other, his wife trailing close behind, animatedly chatting about dinner prep and appetizers. Their laughter faded into the multi-level parking garage. My phone buzzed again. A text from Victoria. "Still running late. Be patient." That was it. "No, sorry. No, can't wait to see you." Just a command. Be patient. I set the bags around me on the sidewalk like little totems of effort and thoughtfulness. The jewelry box sat neatly atop Victoria's gifts, nestled in a burgundy bag with a satin ribbon. Inside that tiny case was more than just green stones. It held the legacy of 3 generations. Sarah's mother wore it on her wedding day. Sarah wore it on ours. And now it was meant for Victoria. Another family passed me, laughing together. The teenage daughter rolled her eyes at something her mother said, but she was grinning, a real, joyful grin. The kind that says, "This is exactly where I want to be." I scrolled through my contacts and hovered over Martin's number. He was always quick to respond. Maybe I should call him instead. But no, I hesitated. Victoria said they were just dealing with Christmas chaos. Maybe I was being too sensitive, overthinking things. Again, the automatic doors hissed open and closed with each gust of traffic. I lifted my head every time, hoping to see her face. Each time, it was someone else. A stranger, a rushing traveler, a family heading home. 3:15 p.m. I shifted from one foot to the other. The excitement I had felt just minutes earlier was now turning sour, like a wool sweater shrunk too tight in the wash, still wearable, but itchy and wrong in all the places that mattered. A passing security officer gave me a polite nod. I nodded back, then glanced at my phone again. Nothing new. Just the same lock screen I had not changed since last December. Emma, grinning with her front teeth missing, sitting proudly under the mismatched ornaments on our old tree. That tree had personality. Their new one, the one in the photos Victoria sent, looked like something from a home design magazine. White and silver, every bauble perfectly placed, not a single homemade ornament in sight. But I told myself that was fine. People grow up. They develop their own styles. New homes, new ideas. That's part of life. Still, I had hoped her voice would sound happier when she heard mine. Snow began falling faster now, swirling under the glow of the street lamps that had flicked on early thanks to the gloomy skies. Denver in late December. I had forgotten how quickly the darkness settled in. I checked my watch again. 3:20 p.m. Still not too bad. Traffic could be messy on Christmas. I remembered that from when Victoria was small and we used to drive out to my mother's place. Roads full of holiday travelers, everyone just a little behind. I pulled my jacket tight and moved to a quieter corner where a row of cushioned seats lined the tall glass windows. There, I created a little circle of gifts around me like a brightly colored fortress. Each bag had been carefully chosen: burgundy for Victoria, forest green for Martin, red and gold for Emma. But the real surprises were tucked away where no one could see them. I reached inside my coat and touched the crisp corners of 3 envelopes, all bearing the Bank of Colorado seal. Serious envelopes. Inside Victoria's was a certified check, $50,000, written in ink and signed by hand. Martin's envelope held the same amount, $50,000. The third envelope was labeled Education Fund in my handwriting, and it carried $75,000 earmarked for the grandkids' futures. Altogether, I was carrying $175,000 in Christmas generosity, tucked into my coat on what was supposed to be a day of connection and joy. After Margaret passed, selling Baker's Auto Parts was the most difficult decision I ever made. I had spent 3 decades building it up, starting in a single-car garage and eventually growing it into a 12-location operation across Colorado. It was more than just a business. It was a monument to the life Margaret and I had built together. But walking those aisles without hearing her voice float down from the office, seeing employees who still remembered her tradition of bringing in homemade cookies every Friday, it all became too much to bear. Letting it go was like losing her all over again. The sale brought in $8 million, and with that came choices. I went conservative with the investments, made sure the money was secure. But most importantly, I used it to remind my family how deeply I still cared for them. I reached inside my coat and pulled out Victoria's envelope again, letting my thumb rest along the sealed edge. $50,000. That was not some lottery windfall, but it was the result of months of careful consideration. Not enough to spoil anyone or create dependency, but enough to make a genuine difference in their lives. Maybe it would be just the boost they needed to finally stop stressing over the mortgage. Maybe it would help them book that trip to Italy they had talked about last spring, but never followed through on. A young couple rushed past my table. She was gripping a baby carrier tightly, while her partner juggled 2 small children and a backpack stuffed to the brim. Their movements were frantic but coordinated in that special way new parents develop. I watched them and couldn't help but smile. I remembered those chaotic days myself. Victoria at 18 months, screaming her way through her first flight, while Margaret and I took turns pacing the aisle to keep her calm. Now the roles had reversed. Victoria was the parent, the one buried in the daily scramble of diapers and deadlines and holiday chaos. Maybe that was all this was, just life getting messy, things running behind like they always do when little kids are involved. I checked my watch again. 3:35 p.m. Still within the realm of reasonable. The education fund had actually been Margaret's idea. I remembered the day she brought it up, her voice already weakening from the cancer. "Promise me," she had whispered, gripping my hand tightly. "Make sure Emma, and any other grandchildren, get the education they deserve. College just keeps getting more expensive." I nodded and told her I would. That promise lived in the third envelope in my coat pocket. And I had not just honored her wish. I had exceeded it. I leaned back in my chair and gently began sorting the bags by recipient, organizing them with the same care I had packed them. The deep burgundy one for Victoria held the emerald necklace Margaret had inherited from her grandmother. 3 generations of women had worn those stones, each one strong, resilient, and deeply tied to family. Now, they were meant to rest against Victoria's collarbone, connecting her to the legacy of the women who came before her. My phone buzzed again, and my heart jumped, until I realized it was just someone nearby answering their own call. "We're stuck in traffic, but we'll be there soon." "Promise," the man said loudly enough for the whole seating area to hear. Soon. That word echoed in my mind. That is exactly what Victoria had said earlier. Soon. I adjusted the ribbons on the bags to keep them from getting crumpled, then turned my gaze back toward the constant shuffle near the exit. I watched family after family reunite, hugging, crying, laughing. That steady stream of joy reminded me why I had made the trip in the first place. The envelopes I carried were not just paper and ink. They were a father's love, converted into something tangible, a final gesture of faith and hope. When Victoria opened that envelope, I imagined her eyes widening in disbelief, just like they had when she was 7 and found the pink bicycle she had begged for waiting under the Christmas tree. And Martin, he would see that I had thought of him, too, treated him equally. Maybe that would mean something. Maybe it would shift the way he looked at me, from father-in-law to family, truly. And when I told them about the education fund, I believed they would finally understand that I was not here for holiday pleasantries. I was planning for their children's futures. That was worth waiting for, worth every cold minute. But by 4:30 p.m., my body had other ideas. The chair I had been sitting in was no longer kind to my back. My spine ached from being hunched in one spot too long, and each time I moved, the weight of the bags seemed to have grown heavier. The airport entrance doors kept whooshing open and shut with robotic consistency, blasting icy air every time they did. My wool coat was no match for the sharp wind slipping through the gaps. I looked down at my watch again. 4:47 p.m. Maybe it was time to find somewhere warmer. Gathering my things had turned into a puzzle. I gripped the suitcase handle in my right hand, slid 3 bags onto my left arm, and gripped the remaining ones in my left fist. With small, careful steps, I made my way back into the terminal, away from that Arctic draft by the exit doors. There was a coffee shop near Gate B15 that looked like it had just enough space for me to rest. I settled into a small table tucked against the wall and arranged my fortress of bags carefully around the chair legs. A young, exhausted barista took my order and handed me a steaming cup of coffee with a tired smile and a flat "Merry Christmas." Her tone said she had already repeated it 100 times that day. 5:15 p.m. The cup was warm in my hands, but the chill that had taken root in my bones refused to leave. People moved past the window in a steady stream. Families heading toward their gates, couples wrapped in each other's arms after long flights, Business travelers walking with that clipped purpose only they possess. Everyone seemed to know where they were going. Everyone except me. I checked my phone again. Still no missed calls. Still no new messages. Just that "be patient" text from earlier in the afternoon. That was all I had heard from my daughter in hours. I stared at her contact name, thumb hovering, wondering whether to try again. But what was the point? By 6 p.m., hunger had kicked in. I bought an overpriced turkey sandwich from the coffee shop and ate it slowly, barely tasting a thing as I watched people come and go through the windows. Every time a group approached, I felt that flicker of hope. And every time it turned out to be strangers, the letdown landed heavier in my chest. 6:45 p.m., Christmas dinner time across America. Tables filled with laughter, clinking glasses, wrapping paper flying through the air. And here I was, alone at a tiny airport table, surrounded by untouched gift bags, looking like some sad department store Santa who had lost his sleigh. My logical side tried to offer explanations. Maybe they were still running late. Maybe they had hit traffic. Maybe Emma had come down with something, and they had needed to find someone to stay with her last minute. Victoria had always been one to make mountains out of molehills. But still a quiet, gnawing voice kept whispering doubts I could not shake. By 7:30 p.m., the coffee shop was closing down. The barista wiped counters with slow, deliberate motions, stacking chairs on tables. I took that as my cue to move again. This time, I headed toward the main information desk, hoping the seating nearby would at least be close to a heating vent. My feet ached. My shoes, those nice leather ones I had bought for the trip, had become instruments of torture after hours of walking. The gift bags weighed down my arms again, and the necklace box pressed uncomfortably against my ribs through my coat. It was still there, still warm from my body heat, still filled with love. By 8:15 p.m., nearly 6 full hours had passed since my plane touched down. This was no longer holiday congestion or bad luck with traffic. This was something else entirely. I moved to a quieter corner near the restrooms, leaned my suitcase against the wall, and dialed Victoria's number again. My fingers felt stiff and clumsy, still chilled from hours of exposure and exhaustion. The phone rang twice before she answered. Her voice came through sharp and irritated, as if I were interrupting her. "Dad, what is it now?" Now. As if I had been pestering her nonstop instead of standing alone for hours, doing exactly what she told me to do. "Honey," I said carefully, trying to keep my voice calm, "I've been waiting here a long time. Do you have any idea how much longer it will be?" 15 more minutes, maximum, she snapped. "And do not call a taxi." Then the line went dead. I stared at my phone in disbelief. 15 minutes. After 6 hours, she suddenly had that level of certainty. And why the sharp warning about not calling a taxi? That part did not make sense. If they were truly delayed because of traffic or some emergency, a taxi would have been the most reasonable solution. The questions began stacking in my mind, one on top of another, spreading like fine cracks across frozen ice. I needed warmth. Real warmth. The cafeteria near Terminal A glowed invitingly with soft yellow light and the promise of hot food. I dragged my suitcase and bags across the polished floor, each step heavy, my body protesting with every movement. 9 hours since landing. 9 hours of vague assurances and empty promises. I found a small table near the window and set my bags around the legs once again, my now familiar defensive circle. Each one represented careful thought, time, and money. The emerald necklace, the education fund, the two $50,000 checks that were supposed to bring happiness, not humiliation. "Can I get you anything?" the cafeteria worker asked gently, her voice practiced but kind. "Coffee, black," I said, "and whatever soup you have." The tomato soup arrived barely warm, but I wrapped my hands around the bowl anyway, desperate for the heat. Steam drifted upward, fogging my glasses. Through the condensation, my reflection stared back at me, older, worn down, and foolish in a way I had never felt before. $200,000. That number surfaced suddenly, sharp and clear. That was what Victoria's education had cost me. 6 years of private college, graduate school, sorority dues, a semester abroad in Italy. For 4 straight years, I had worked overtime at Baker's Auto Parts every single weekend to make those payments. While other men my age played golf or took weekend trips with their wives, I stayed in the shop, ordering inventory, balancing books, pushing every spare dollar toward her future. Margaret had warned me more than once. "You're spoiling her, Roger," she said. "She never even thanks you." I brushed it off every time. Victoria was driven, ambitious. She deserved opportunities. The soup cooled untouched as memories kept coming. Her graduation day, when I drove 8 hours to attend the ceremony, only to spend 15 rushed minutes with her before she disappeared with friends. No acknowledgement of the sacrifices. No mention of the extra shifts that paid for that diploma. Her wedding followed. I gave a simple toast about family, effort, and loyalty. I could see it on her face, embarrassment. Martin's parents, polished and academic, delivered eloquent speeches filled with references to literature and philosophy. I talked about honest work. Christmas mornings flashed through my mind. Victoria tearing through expensive gifts with casual expectation, as if generosity were something she was owed instead of something chosen. Each memory landed harder than the last. I opened my wallet and stared down at the 3 sealed envelopes. $175,000. More money than many people earn in years, dismissed with a curt, "Be patient," and a warning not to call a taxi. That warning still nagged at me. If they were delayed, why forbid the solution? Unless they were not delayed at all. The thought slipped in quietly and then hit me full force. What if Victoria simply did not want to pick me up? What if this was deliberate, some kind of passive punishment meant to teach me a lesson about inconvenience or control? I thought about the BMW I helped her buy in college, the apartment deposit I covered without hesitation, the credit card balances I paid off without questions. Every expression of love had been converted into financial support. Every act of care measured in dollars. Had I raised a daughter or trained a debtor? Across the room, a young family shared French fries while their toddlers scribbled with crayons. The parents laughed as they wiped his hands, delighting in his crooked drawings. Simple moments. Free moments. The kind of Christmas memories that did not require checks or sacrifice. When had my relationship with Victoria become so transactional? My phone lay silent on the table. No calls. No texts. No explanation for why 15 minutes had already doubled. I checked my watch. The expensive one Victoria had given me 3 Christmases ago, likely purchased with money I had transferred to her account. 9:05 p.m. Christmas dinner hour. Families everywhere were seated around tables, sharing food and gratitude. I sat alone in an airport cafeteria, surrounded by gift bags that now felt less like presents and more like evidence of my own blindness. By 9:15 p.m., the truth became impossible to ignore. Something was wrong. Not late. Not inconsiderate. Wrong. I scrolled through my call history. 31 calls to Victoria. 4 to Martin. All unanswered. No return calls. No messages. Just silence stretching across 7 hours of Christmas Day. My hands began to shake as I tried again. Call 32. "Victoria, it's Dad," I said into her voicemail. "Please call me back. I'm really worried now. It's after 9 on Christmas night. Just let me know you're okay." Call 33 to Martin. Voicemail. "Martin, it's Roger. I've been waiting at the airport for over 7 hours. Please call me back." Call 34 to Victoria. Ring. Ring. Voicemail. Call 35. My fingers fumbled clumsily. Voicemail again. 35 calls. No accident made people ignore 35 calls. No traffic jam lasted 7 hours without a single update. There was no reasonable explanation left, unless they were intentionally avoiding me. The realization flooded my chest like ice water. I pushed it away immediately. No, Victoria could be selfish. She could be entitled, but she would not be cruel. Not like this. But then another possibility gripped me. What if something had happened to them? What if they were lying in a hospital somewhere, unable to call? What if little Emma had come down with something serious, and they were too overwhelmed to answer the phone? My hands trembled as I reached for the gift bags. I had sat still for long enough. It was time to stop wondering and start doing something. The airport's main exit area was alive with late-night energy. Flights that had been delayed all day were finally arriving. Families reunited at baggage claims. Taxi drivers lined up, some holding cardboard signs with names, others waiting with practiced patience for their next fare. I found the designated rideshare and taxi zone and pulled out my phone. My thumb moved with surprising steadiness as I tapped in the number for the Denver cab company. Denver cab, the dispatcher answered quickly, her voice clipped but polite. I need a cab to Cherry Hills Village from Denver International. I told her, trying to make my voice sound firm, not desperate. Which terminal? Main terminal. Door 507 East. And the address? I recited Victoria's street and house number without hesitation. I knew it by heart, the home I had helped them buy years ago. $20,000 for the down payment. No questions asked. No thank you card ever sent. Fare will run about $65, she said. Driver should be there in about 12 minutes. 12 minutes. After 7 hours of being ignored, 12 more felt like nothing. I made my way over to the pickup curb, positioning myself where the cab would be able to see me. I checked my phone one last time. Still no calls. Still no texts. No explanations. It was 9:25 p.m. By now, most homes across the country had finished dinner, cleaned up the dishes, and moved on to board games or Christmas movies. Children were probably falling asleep with new toys still in their laps, wrapping paper crumpled in piles by the fireplace. And I stood outside an airport terminal, shivering in the December cold, carrying thousands of dollars in gifts, waiting to be driven to a house where the people I loved most might be hiding from me on purpose. At exactly 9:27 p.m., a yellow taxi pulled to the curb. The driver, a man in his 50s with kind eyes and a worn Broncos cap, stepped out and helped me load the bags into the trunk. "Christmas visit?" he asked as I slid into the back seat. "Something like that," I said, unsure what else to call it. As we pulled away from the airport, I watched the terminal lights shrink in the rearview mirror. 7 hours of waiting. 35 unanswered calls. $175,000 in certified checks stuffed into my coat. Either my family was in serious trouble, or I was about to learn exactly how little I mattered to the people I had spent my entire life sacrificing for. The cab's heater warmed my face, but it could not touch the cold that had rooted itself in my chest. The numbers kept cycling through my mind like a loop I could not shut off. 12 hours of travel, 7 hours at the terminal, 35 calls without a single reply. Long day at the airport? The driver asked, glancing back at me in the mirror. Waited 12 hours for family to pick me up? I said. 12. His eyebrows raised. Yikes. Yeah, Christmas travel can be rough. Family reunion. I mumbled, though the words tasted wrong in my mouth. That phrase was supposed to mean laughter, hugs, joy. This was something else entirely. They must be excited to see you, he said kindly. I turned my eyes toward the window. Neighborhoods flew past, houses trimmed in glowing lights. Behind those glowing windows, I imagined families gathered around trees, parents smiling, grandparents holding sleepy kids in pajamas. I hope so, I said, though even I could hear how brittle my voice had become. Hope felt like a thin thread, fraying fast. One of the gift bags shifted as the cab turned. I caught it before it tipped and ran my fingers over the wrapping paper. The texture reminded me of how much thought had gone into each item. Every gift had been chosen weeks in advance, packed with care. The emerald necklace alone was worth more than most people's monthly paychecks. And yet, when was the last time Victoria had bought me anything with real thought behind it? When had she last called just to ask how I was doing? Without needing money, without asking for a favor, my memory offered up an answer I did not want. Christmas 2 years ago. I had driven 4 hours to spend the holiday at their home. Victoria was distracted during dinner, constantly looking at her phone, replying to texts while I tried to talk about the possible sale of the business. When I handed her the pearl earrings, Margaret's idea before she passed, Victoria thanked me with that polite tone people use in department stores, then returned to her messages like nothing had happened. I made excuses back then. She was a new mom. Emma was teething. She had a lot on her plate. But now, riding in this cab with the gift bags at my feet, the memory no longer felt benign. It felt like the first time I realized I was becoming invisible in her world. "You from Denver originally?" James asked, breaking into my thoughts with his gentle voice. "Lived here for over 30 years. Built up an auto parts business from scratch." "Wow, that's impressive." "It was supposed to be a family business," I added quietly. "But my daughter chose a different path. College. Graduate school. Bigger dreams than running a parts shop with her dad." James nodded thoughtfully. "Education's good, sure. But working with family, that's a blessing too. My son helps me out part-time, dispatch mostly, but he's learning." The way he spoke about his son, present tense, involved, part of his life, cut deeper than I expected. When had Victoria last asked about Baker's auto? Even when I brought up the possibility of selling it, all she wanted to know was how much money I stood to make. Not what it meant to let go of something I had poured 30 years of my life into. At 10:15 p.m., we rolled through a neighborhood where every house was lit up like a holiday card. One family strolled down the sidewalk, bundled in coats and holding a small child between them. Their laughter drifted through the slightly cracked window of the cab. "Beautiful night for Christmas," James said, his voice full of calm. "Beautiful for some," I replied. "For others, it is turning out to be the loneliest night of the year." I glanced down at my phone again. Still nothing. No apologies. No explanations. Just a flat, empty screen. Because now it was clear, wasn't it? This was not a delay. This was not a misunderstanding. This was intentional. You do not ignore 35 phone calls by mistake. Even hospital waiting rooms have phones. If they were truly dealing with a crisis, someone, anyone, would have picked up, or at least called me back. Someone would have cared. Instead, all I had was silence. A silence that settled over me like a concrete weight, pressing into my chest as the taxi turned onto Victoria Street. "Almost there," James said, eyes on the road. "What's the house number?" I gave it to him automatically. That familiar address, the one I helped them afford. A house in a beautiful neighborhood, one that I helped make possible through sacrifice, sweat, and trust. We pulled into the driveway behind a silver Mercedes and a navy blue BMW. Both vehicles had Colorado plates. Both looked freshly driven. Both clearly worked just fine. "Looks like you've got a full house tonight," James said with a cheerful tone as the taxi rolled to a stop. I looked out through the smudged window toward Victoria's house. The snow on the lawn was pristine, untouched except for a narrow shovel path leading up to the front door. Warm golden light spilled from the living room windows, casting soft glows across the white yard. Through the glass, I could see movement, shadows of people gathered around a dining table. Laughter floated faintly through the cold. Wine glasses caught the light. The unmistakable look of a joyful Christmas dinner in full swing. A celebration I had not been invited to. "That'll be $68.50, James said. I handed him $75 with hands that felt stiff and unsteady. "Keep the change," I said, voice thin. "You sure you're all right?" he asked, frowning. "You look." "I'm fine," I lied automatically. James helped unload the bags from the trunk. 6 brightly wrapped gift bags and a worn suitcase. To anyone else, they might have looked like luggage. But to me, they were evidence. Proof of weeks of careful planning and love packed into boxes and envelopes. A father's effort for a reunion that, I now realized, had never actually been part of anyone's plans but mine. As James drove away, the cold air sliced through my coat like it was nothing. I stood alone at the edge of the driveway, watching shadows dance inside a house I had helped pay for. 35 unanswered calls. 13 hours of travel and waiting. And inside, laughter, conversation, clinking glasses. Everything proceeding exactly as they had intended. I stepped toward the front window, moving quietly, not quite sure what I was hoping to see. Roy sat comfortably at the head of the dining table, mid-story, gesturing with enthusiasm. Lindsay laughed as she topped off wine glasses. Martin leaned back in his chair, smiling as if nothing in the world could be wrong. And Victoria, my daughter, the one I had poured my life into, looked perfectly at ease. Relaxed. Not an ounce of worry in her expression. Not a trace of concern for the man who had been stranded at an airport all day, waiting for her. No one looked like they were expecting a missing guest. My legs felt weak under me. I placed the heaviest of the gift bags on the porch step and grabbed the railing to steady myself. The sharp edge of the necklace box pressed against my ribs through my coat, reminding me once again how much love I had packed into that tiny velvet container. Love they had chosen not to receive. The front door was decorated with a beautiful holiday wreath, sparkling ribbons, frosted pine cones, artificial snow. Victoria had always loved Christmas decorations. I remembered buying her first tree when she was 7 years old, teaching her how to wrap the lights around the branches without tangling them. Every year after that, I helped her decorate, until college, when she moved out and started building a life that slowly closed its doors to me. Now she had the big house, the picture-perfect decorations, the family celebration. And I was on the outside, quite literally. I rang the doorbell. Footsteps approached. The door opened. Victoria appeared in the entry, flushed from wine and still glowing from dinner. Her face shifted rapidly. Surprise, confusion, and then something else. Panic. "Dad?" she said, her voice pitched slightly too high. "You're here. I'm so sorry. We had a flat tire on the way to get you." I stepped forward with the bags in hand. She instinctively moved aside. "A flat tire?" I said, glancing toward the driveway. "That's strange. Both cars seem to be here and just fine." She blinked. I forgot to call you back. My phone died, and then Martin's car started acting up." The excuses tumbled out fast, tripping over each other, each one contradicting the last. I stepped inside, my hands still weighed down by the gifts. The heat of the house was immediate, but it did not reach the chill inside me. From the entry, I could clearly see the dining room. Plates scraped clean, empty wine glasses, the remains of what had clearly been a full, abundant meal. The table had been set for exactly the number of people now seated. No extra chair. No place for me. "Roger," Roy called out, standing from the table with a look of genuine surprise. "We had no idea you were still at the airport." Lindsay rose from her seat as well, concern etched into her face. "Oh, you poor thing. You must be exhausted." I set the bags down carefully beside the door. 35 calls, Victoria," I said, calm but firm. I called 35 times. The room fell into silence. Martin shifted uncomfortably in his seat, eyes darting away from mine. He looked like a man trapped by his own cowardice. "We were just about to leave to get you," Victoria insisted, her voice trembling as she glanced at Martin. "Right, Martin?" He mumbled something about technical issues, but it was barely audible. His eyes never met mine. "I see you all managed to have dinner without me," I said quietly, my eyes scanning the remnants of the meal. Roy's brow furrowed. "Victoria told us you were arriving tomorrow morning," he said slowly. "She said your flight got delayed." Victoria froze. Her face lost all color. Martin picked up his wine glass and stared into it like it might offer an escape route. "Tomorrow morning?" I repeated. Silence stretched thin across the table. Lindsay, ever the peacemaker, moved quickly to defuse the tension. "Roger, sweetheart, you must be starving. Let me fix you a plate." She bustled off to the kitchen, taking comfort in having something to do. Roy gestured toward the empty seat beside him, his expression now shifting from confusion to a kind of quiet judgment. "Come sit down," he said gently. "We'll talk this through. But first, let's get you fed and rested." I lowered myself into the chair, setting my gift bags beside me. The burgundy one with Victoria's necklace leaned against my leg, its contents heavy with emotion. Victoria launched into a nervous monologue. "It's fine, Dad. You're here now. Just a mix-up with the cars. You know how chaotic Christmas travel can be." 35 calls, I said again, low and clear, cutting through her babble. Martin's fork slipped and clattered against his plate. Lindsay returned, placing a full plate in front of me with practiced kindness. "Turkey, stuffing, green beans." "Tell us about your flight, Roger," she said softly. "Was the weather bad? These Christmas travel days can be dreadful." "No weather issues," I said, accepting the cup of coffee she poured. "Skies were clear all day." Roy leaned forward slightly, his tone shifting into that of a man used to evaluating testimony. "So your flight was on time? Landed at 2:47 this afternoon. Right on schedule." I took a small bite of the turkey. I could barely taste it. Roy tapped a finger on the table. "Then that means you've been in Denver for over 8 hours. Victoria jumped in, flustered. No, that's not. He just got here. There were car problems, and I waited at the airport," I said plainly. "I called Victoria dozens of times. No one answered." Lindsay's hand flew to her chest. "You were at the airport alone for 8 hours on Christmas Day?" Martin muttered something about technical difficulties again, but his voice was thin and full of guilt. He could not bring himself to look up, not at his wife, not at me, not even at his in-laws. "Roger," Roy said with a seriousness that silenced the room. "If you needed a ride, you should have called us. We would have come right away." "I didn't have your number memorized," I said, and I kept thinking. I glanced at Victoria, who was gripping her wine glass like a lifeline. I kept thinking someone would pick up. Someone would answer. Lindsay reached out and gently patted my hand. "Oh, you poor dear," Lindsay said softly, her voice full of sympathy. 8 hours, and we had no idea. We truly believed you were not arriving until tomorrow morning." "That is what Victoria told you," I confirmed calmly. Silence settled over the dining room once again, heavier than before. Victoria let out a brittle laugh that scraped at my nerves like fingernails on a chalkboard. "Well, he is here now," she said with forced cheer, glancing toward Martin. "That is what matters, right?" Martin nodded faintly, still unable to look at anyone directly. Roy's expression had changed. As a retired federal judge, he had spent a lifetime listening carefully, weighing facts, spotting inconsistencies others tried to hide. His daughter-in-law had said I was arriving tomorrow. Yet here I sat, after waiting 8 hours for a ride that never came. "Victoria," Roy said slowly, his voice measured. "Perhaps you could explain how there was confusion about Roger's arrival time." "I must have misunderstood," Victoria replied quickly, her voice climbing an octave. "You know how travel plans are. Flights change. Things get mixed up." But Roy was not a man who accepted vague answers. His eyes moved deliberately from Victoria to Martin, then to me, assembling a picture that clearly unsettled him. I continued eating out of habit rather than hunger. Every bite tasted like cardboard. The gift bags beside my chair felt like silent witnesses, expressions of love prepared for people who had chosen to abandon me instead. "Excuse me," I said quietly, setting my fork down. "I need to use the restroom." Lindsay immediately rose. "Of course, dear. Down the hall, first door on the right." I walked slowly through the softly lit hallway, my footsteps muffled by the thick carpeting I had helped pay for without a second thought. The bathroom door stood slightly ajar. Then I heard voices. Victoria and Martin were in the kitchen, speaking in low tones, believing themselves safely out of earshot. "I really wish he had not shown up tonight," Martin said, the irritation he had masked all evening finally slipping through. My hand froze on the bathroom doorframe. "He always embarrasses us in front of your parents." Victoria replied casually. Those ridiculous stories about building his business from nothing, like he thinks he is some big-time tycoon. The words landed like physical blows. Ridiculous stories. I had built Baker's Auto Parts from a $5,000 loan into a multi-million-dollar operation. Your dad just does not understand how to act around people like my parents, Martin continued. The way he talks, his mannerisms, it is awkward. People like Roy and Lindsay. The same people who had always treated me with courtesy and respect. I was hoping if we ignored him long enough today, he would just go back home, Victoria added. I heard dishes clinking as they were placed into the dishwasher. Maybe he would get the hint that we do not really want him around. 13 hours. 13 hours of deliberate cruelty, designed to make me disappear. My legs weakened, and I gripped the wall to steady myself, forcing myself to keep listening. The way he goes on about his little auto parts stores like he built some massive tech empire, Martin said with a laugh. Victoria laughed softly in agreement. It is embarrassing. Little stores. 12 locations. 30 years. 16-hour days. Missed vacations. Sacrificed comfort. Everything I had given up so she could have opportunities one never had. Maybe next Christmas we just do not invite him at all, Martin suggested. Tell him we are traveling or something. That is perfect, Victoria said without hesitation. Your parents are so polished, so educated. Dad means well, but he just does not fit in. That working-class charm might have been fine when I was younger, but now it is just not their type. Roy, who had spent half an hour last Christmas asking thoughtful questions about auto parts distribution. Lindsay, who had listened with genuine interest as I talked about customer service and loyalty. My breathing grew shallow. Each word carved deeper into what remained of my pride as a father. At least the money situation will be resolved soon, Victoria said, her tone shifting to something practical and detached. Once well, you know, the inheritance, then we will not have to pretend with these awkward family gatherings anymore. The inheritance. They were waiting for me to die. I stood there in that hallway, surrounded by warmth in a house I had helped buy, listening to my own daughter discuss my death like a pending business transaction. The emerald necklace pressed against my chest through my coat. 3 generations of family history suddenly felt like a cruel joke, an expensive one, played on a foolish old man. Something inside me hardened and crystallized. The wounded father began to give way to something colder, sharper. I reached into my coat and felt the envelopes. $175,000. Money I had planned to give freely, joyfully, out of love. Now it would serve a very different purpose. I straightened my shoulders and touched my wallet, feeling the clean edges of the checks inside. Victoria wanted my money. She could have it, but she was going to earn every devastating penny. I stepped back into the kitchen, my footsteps deliberate and loud. Victoria and Martin were still loading the dishwasher, their voices back to normal conversation. They both looked up, expecting nothing more than my quiet return. I heard every single word you just said, I told them evenly. The plate slipped from Victoria's hands. It would have shattered on the tile if Martin had not caught it instinctively. Dad, her voice was suddenly small, unsteady. 13 hours at the airport. I continued, my voice controlled but rising. 35 unanswered calls. And you two were back here discussing how I embarrass you in front of Roy and Lindsay. The color drained from Victoria's face. Martin stepped back until he hit the counter. Dad, you do not understand. Victoria rushed out. That was not what we meant. You took it out of context. Context. I stepped closer, blocking their path back to the dining room. You said you wished I had not shown up tonight. You mocked my life's work. You planned to never invite me for Christmas again. We never meant to hurt you, she whispered. And in that moment, I realized just how little that mattered. Victoria's voice rose higher, edged with panic. The car really did break down. I lifted my hand and pointed toward the window that looked out onto the driveway. There are 2 cars sitting out there. Both of them work. Both of them were available to pick up your father, who waited 13 hours at an airport on Christmas Day. Martin cleared his throat and shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. Maybe we did not explain ourselves very well. It has been a long day for everyone. Explain yourselves well? My voice carried the weight of 24 years of disappointment finally coming into focus. You laughed about my little auto parts stores. 12 locations, Martin. 30 years of 16-hour days so Victoria could have everything I never did. You are overreacting, Victoria said, but her voice cracked halfway through the sentence. We love you. You know that. Love. The word tasted bitter. Love. I repeated quietly. You told Martin that once I die and you get the inheritance, you will not have to pretend to care about these awkward family gatherings anymore. The kitchen went completely still. The refrigerator hummed softly. Somewhere in the dining room, Roy and Lindsay's conversation drifted faintly, unaware of what was unfolding. Victoria stared at me, eyes wide. How did you hear that? I was standing in the hallway, I said evenly, listening to my daughter discuss my death like a financial milestone. Martin shuffled his feet, staring anywhere but at me. Your dad misunderstood what we meant, he said weakly. We should all calm down and talk this through rationally. Misunderstood. I pulled out my phone and turned the screen toward them. 35 calls. Would you like me to explain how I misunderstood those two? Victoria changed tactics, her tone softening into something pleading. Dad, we were just stressed. It was a crazy day. We said things we did not mean. Stressed? I cut her off. You were relaxed, comfortable, planning how to exclude me from future holidays while I sat 12 miles away, wondering if you were dead in a car accident. The voices from the dining room faded. Roy and Lindsay were probably wondering what had taken so long. People like Roy and Lindsay. I continued, repeating her exact words. Too sophisticated for someone with working-class mannerisms. Is that what you told them about why I was not coming until tomorrow? Victoria opened her mouth, then closed it again, unable to form a response. 24 years, I said quietly. 24 years believing I raised a daughter who loved her father. Tonight, I learned I raised someone who is ashamed of me. Footsteps approached. Roy appeared in the doorway, Lindsay close behind him, both of them visibly concerned. Is everything all right? Roy asked. We heard raised voices. Roy, Lindsay, I said calmly. Please come in here. There are things you need to hear. Victoria shot me a look of pure panic. Dad, please do not. Do not what? I interrupted. Tell them the truth? We moved into the living room. Roy and Lindsay sat on the couch, while Victoria and Martin remained standing, their discomfort obvious. I positioned myself near my gift bags, the brightly wrapped packages now holding a very different significance. Roy, I began. You asked earlier about whether my flight was delayed. Let me explain what actually happened. Victoria tried to interject. Dad, maybe this should stay private. 13 hours, I continued, turning directly to Roy and Lindsay. I spent 13 hours at Denver International Airport today. I called Victoria 35 times. No one answered. Lindsay's hand flew to her chest. 13 hours? Alone? On Christmas Day? But the car trouble, Roy started, then stopped, his legal mind clearly working through the timeline. There was no car trouble, I said simply. Both vehicles were here all day. They ignored my calls because they hoped I would give up and go home. Roy stood up, his face flushing with anger. This is completely unacceptable. How could you treat Roger this way? We made a mistake, Victoria said desperately. We can explain. A mistake. Lindsay's voice carried the sharp authority of someone who had spent decades teaching ethics. You deliberately abandoned him at an airport on Christmas. I reached down and lifted the burgundy gift bag, pulling out the first envelope. I came here tonight with Christmas gifts, I said. Generous ones. The envelope felt heavy in my hand. Official bank letterhead, certified funds, months of careful planning. This check, I said, holding it up, is for $50,000. I set it down and lifted the next envelope. Martin's contains the same amount. Then the third. and the education fund for Emma totals $75,000. Victoria's face drained of color. Dad, that is $175,000. Yes, I said calmly. Money I plan to give freely out of love. Martin finally found his voice. We can fix this. Please do not make permanent decisions based on one bad night. One night, I replied. While I was at the airport, wondering if they were dead in an accident, they were here having Christmas dinner. And afterward, I heard them discussing how I embarrassed them in front of you, how my life's work is silly, how I do not know how to behave around people like you. Roy's face tightened with fury. Roger, I am deeply ashamed of my son's behavior. This is unconscionable. The money will fund my own travels instead, I said, slipping the checks back into my coat. As for my will, which currently leaves my entire estate to Victoria, that changes immediately. Victoria's composure finally shattered. You do not mean that. We are family. Family. I looked at her, my voice cold and steady. Family does not abandon each other on Christmas. Family does not mock one another's life work. Family does not plan future holidays around exclusion. Lindsay reached over and gently touched my arm. Roger, we had no idea what you endured. This is devastating. Nearly $3 million, I said, watching Victoria's face collapse. That is what tonight cost you. The immediate gifts and the inheritance. The room went silent. The only sound was the steady ticking of Victoria's expensive wall clock, bought, no doubt, with money I had provided over the years. And in that silence, everything finally changed. Downtown Denver shimmered beneath the glow of streetlights as my taxi pulled into the circular driveway. It was 1:30 in the morning, but I felt more alert, more alive than I had in years. A doorman in a dark overcoat stepped forward and opened the door for me, then carefully retrieved my single suitcase from the trunk. No gift bags this time. No heavy symbols of misplaced love weighing me down. Just the clothes on my back, the bag in my hand, and a new sense of clarity settling into my bones. Inside, crystal chandeliers bathed the lobby in a warm, golden light, casting soft shadows across gleaming marble floors. I approached the front desk with quiet confidence. Behind the counter stood a young woman with kind eyes and a professional smile. Welcome to the Ritz-Carlton, Denver, she said. How may I assist you this evening? I need accommodations for a long-term stay. I replied, my voice steadier than it had been in years. At least a month, maybe more. Certainly, sir, she said with a gracious nod, already typing. We offer excellent extended stay options. Will this be for business or leisure? Pure leisure, I said. The words felt unfamiliar coming out of my mouth, but not in a bad way. In fact, they felt almost liberating. I'm starting a completely new chapter in my life. Her smile widened into something genuine. That sounds wonderful. Any particular amenities you'd like us to prioritize? My mind flashed briefly to Victoria's house, the one I had helped pay for, where I had been treated like a burden. I lifted my chin slightly. The finest accommodations you have, I said. Money is no concern. 20 minutes later, I was standing in a corner suite on the top floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around the room, revealing the city aglow with life beneath the night sky, stretching toward the distant silhouette of the Rockies. I set my suitcase down on the king-sized bed and walked over to the glass, placing my hand against the cool pane. For the first time in what felt like forever, I was spending money on me. The leather chair at the carved mahogany desk felt like it had been waiting for me. I settled into it and opened the hotel's complimentary laptop. Travel websites sprang to life on the screen. Italy's rolling Tuscan hills, France's Loire Valley in full bloom, Spain's vibrant Mediterranean coast. With $125,000, I could live well. First-class flights, 5-star hotels, private vineyard tours, meals at restaurants where the menus had no prices and the wine came in crystal decanters. I pulled out my wallet and looked at the place where Victoria's and Martin's checks had been nestled just hours earlier. That space was empty now, but it did not feel like a loss. It felt like possibility. Those envelopes were still in my coat pocket, unspent, untouched, and they would stay that way. That money would fund my adventures, not bankroll anyone's selfishness or stage politeness. Emma's education fund, on the other hand, would remain intact. She was still young enough to deserve the benefit of the doubt. My phone buzzed. A text message. From Victoria. Dad, please call. We can talk this through. I stared at the screen for one long second and then hit delete. No reply. The phone went back into my pocket. Beside the desk sat the suite's elegant landline, cradled in polished chrome next to a leather-bound portfolio. I picked up the receiver and pressed the button for concierge. Good evening, Mr. Baker, came a smooth, courteous voice. How can we assist you tonight? I'd like to speak with someone tomorrow about arranging a European travel itinerary, I said. The most in-depth packages available. Absolutely, the concierge replied. We'll have our top travel specialist meet with you at whatever time suits you best. Are there any particular regions you're most interested in? All of them, I said, surprising myself with the weight and freedom in those 3 words. I have the time and the means to go wherever I want. After I hung up, I walked into the bathroom. Marble counters, heated tile floors, and a soaking tub the size of a small spa greeted me. I caught my reflection in the mirror. My face looked tired, sure, but not beaten. Not anymore. There was something different in my eyes. Something steadier, stronger. Satisfaction. I returned to the desk, opened the leather portfolio, and pulled out a sheet of the hotel stationery. The hotel's gold-tipped pen felt smooth and deliberate in my hand. I began writing notes, mapping out the future in long, flowing ink. Spring in Italy, summer in the south of France, autumn in northern Spain, winter wherever the sun still shines. There would be no more scheduled visits with people who mocked my values. No more holidays with those who saw my generosity as some kind of embarrassment. No more sacrificing my joy to make others comfortable. I glanced at the bedside clock. 1:55 a.m. In just a few hours, the travel consultant would help me finalize plans for adventures I had put off for decades. In a week, I could be on a flight bound for Rome. In a month, I might be sipping red wine in a Tuscan vineyard, laughing with strangers who actually cared to listen. I leaned back in the leather chair, looked out over the glowing city, and for the first time in years, I felt completely, unquestionably free.